Wait, what did you just say?
I said it looks like a flannel shirt.
Cool. Thanks. All right.
Yeah. So, right. So, we had a really good conversation with Richard, and he surprised me a little bit with all the things he's been up to, and he's really put in the time and energy. Like, this guy knows what he's talking about, not from a theoretical standpoint, but from an action-based standpoint. And
Yeah.
a family man.
Yeah. What I appreciated is you both are very well read in this area, and there was some great content that's very academic, not to berate it at all, but I do. Anyway, um, like there's some really intellectual conversation, and then it got very grounded. And I appreciated both those together.
Yeah. So you guys are in for a treat. Hang out, listen, subscribe, share our podcast, and be sure to go over to the Compton Cowboys or what's the other one?
Blast.org.
Blast.org and support those endeavors. And we're working on getting you a new supply of adrenochrome cola. So stick around.
Sis, hallo?
Leven.
Bestuur zeker wegen them.
Joh je iets niet, joh.
Sitaki Benza, Anika City.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And welcome to another episode of the Moped Outlaws. Today, our guest is Rich Pellegrino from the Global Woke Institute from the website howwokeami.org. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Rich, welcome to the program.
Thank you, guys and ladies listening in.
Yeah.
So where are you in the world?
I am in Hotlanta, in the middle of the two hurricanes, but thankfully we were untouched west of Atlanta.
Got it.
Very nice.
Both Greg and I are just north of San Francisco, about different levels but we're both north of San Francisco in Marin County. Right now, I'm feeling a little anxious about this conversation. There's some confronting things that we are likely to talk about. And as someone who is no longer identified as white, I have moved into a space where I know the pain and suffering better than those who are less woke. And certainly I have much more to learn.
Oh, we're gonna get it.
What had you decide to create the Global Woke Institute, Rich?
Well, two reasons, Mark. One is why would I in the world use the word woke when I was discouraged by both my millennial kids and my friends who are professors who are also all woke, but they said that term is worn out, misused, abused, and so forth. I said, perfect, because, why should I or anybody let someone else define a great term like woke, being awakened, okay, and take just something that was so positive and is so, enlightening and abuse it. So, yeah, so I revived it and used it, and that's great. My definition of woke is very simple. Being awakened to the fact of oneness in a nutshell.
Got it. So my question was actually about your life experience and what led up to you creating this initiative, this endeavor.
Well, I mean, I was born woke because I was born in the 60s, 70s, or I grew up, even though I haven't grown up yet, in the 70s. And so that was the, woke era. That's really what it was utilized in songs and so forth, but it was the era of questioning and awakening and not just accepting tradition and what we were told by our parents. My parents were Archie and Edith Bunker, from All in the Family, and I was the meathead. But that's where I came from. So, but I just want to also say, even being awake, you still need your sleep. Okay, so I can get it for those people that don't want to be completely. Everybody's got to choose their own level, of awakening. However, you're free to choose yours, but don't tread on mine. That's all I ask. Okay, let's find a way where we can work together because it's about oneness. Go ahead, Greg. I'm sorry.
Well, so what does woke mean?
Again, my simple definition is being awakened and enlightened to the fact of oneness, that we are essentially one. Human beings, living things, on every level. That's the essential level.
Okay.
But on the larger level, okay, it does away with all the false supremacies and gets you to your authentic personal identity. Okay, the false supremacies of race, racial supremacy, of religious supremacy, and national supremacy, and gender or sexual orientation supremacies. Those are all false. I wrote the book, I Am Not White, One Man's Journey from Whiteness to Oneness, because that's my journey of finding authentic identity, who I am.
I love this subject of identity because so much of what informs it and solidifies it is the beliefs that we create and those that we're conditioned to create within ourselves around identity. And so much of what's causing all the polarization in our culture right now is something that I like the term identity politics, right? We are who we believe is the right or left or those sorts of things. And the problem with when you identify with some form of external culture is that if there's a new piece of information that comes in, it's not just an analytical awareness. Now it's actually sort of attacking who you are and the way that you identify. And when the ego gets involved, it's much harder to pull a rotten tooth.
For sure. And it's more painful too on both sides. Yeah. And so, what I see us going through now as a nation, as a world, really, because that's, let me back up a little. You asked me why Global Woke Institute. Woke is one part of it, but as important, and perhaps more important, is global in front of that. Because when I talk about oneness, we are one neighborhood now. The world is, SteamYard. It makes us one internet. We're one neighborhood. And so everything we have to take in perspective of, you have to take a global perspective. And we're not. Americans hardly know anything about what really is going on outside of our borders. We say Black Lives Matter, and I helped start the chapter here in Atlanta. But we really mean Black American lives. We don't have a clue about Black Haitian or Black African or, other Black lives. So that's part of our whole identity thing now, is learning who we are. We're going through that just like we did in the 70s, and it's good. And as much as I don't like the guy from New York who I grew up with, who's running for president, and the carpetbagger I tell the Southern people here from up north, the fraudster, but that helps us, because you need the yin yang, the juxtaposition to figure out who we are.
Each cause and effect relationship that arises out of conflict has something to teach us.
Right. Exactly. And we're forced right now, because of what you said, identity politics. I mean, it's always really been that way. Here locally, we had a lady run for office named Sandra Bullock. She just did it as a joke, right? And she won because her name was Sandra Bullock.
Mm.
And then she quit. Okay, and she
Oh,
quit the race.
shoot.
And I mean, she didn't want to. She just did it as a joke, you know. But that's the level. You know, we have to start. You know, and I know you do this in your coaching, Mark, and Greg, in your work too. You have to start at essential levels. You know, like I view myself as a soul with a body, not as a body with a soul, and work from there. You know, up. And like you said, we've been given. I have a worksheet on, you know, finding your authentic identity when I do my book signings, and I have 3 columns. One is your given identity, what your parents told you you are, what your society tells you you are, you're white or whatever you are, your name, you know, and things like that. Then your accepted column, what you accept from that, what you've been told, and then your chosen column, what you chose. Okay, like I chose the title Rich the Equalizer, Pellegrino.
Hmm.
Okay, because anytime anybody tries to exalt themselves above another based on these false supremacies, I equalize them gently with words, you know, not with violence, trying not to be violent, but sometimes the reaction is violent.
Well, let me ask you, as a father, was that always true? As you being a father, were your children always an equal to you?
Well, I mean, that's talking about parenting roles. I would say first you have equity before you have equality. Okay, so it's how you treat, just like in our racial dynamics. So, by the way, I'm glad you raised children. I have 8 grown children, 8 grandchildren, and they're all mixed of all the so-called races because my wife is West Indian. So, yeah, at my 70th birthday celebration last week, they all spoke about the fact that I raised each one of them to speak their truth.
All right.
That's the best. That's the best testimony I could get, even when their truth is not my truth. Right?
That's awesome. And did you find any struggle for yourself when a truth came up through one of your children that you didn't agree with? Were you able to support it still?
To varying degrees. I'm not perfect like anybody else. You know, I had to go and pray and meditate.
All right, that's awesome.
No,
That's brilliant. Like that, to me, that's brilliant. Like in this culture that all 3 of us are so aware of is like a powder keg and it can explode at any moment. That's such great advice. Like when you fuck up, go pray and meditate, work it out.
Yeah, breathe deeply, do whatever. I mean, relax. You guys use humor. It's great. You know, it's to take the edge off. I'm trying to learn. I work with the King family in Atlanta. You know, I'm with field director for Dr. King's organization, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and I'm trying to learn the nonviolent approach in words, in attitude, not just in weaponry, and it's not easy. I don't know that I would have been part of the freedom marches and taken the blows without giving them back, honestly. You know, so this is not easy work, but it helps if you start with the even playing field. Okay, I'm no better than you. You're no better than me. There's my truth, there's your truth, and there's the truth out there, right? We're all trying to get to that, you know, and we can do it much better together. My proudest achievement here, I build coalitions. Okay, I've done it for years, but most of the time it's been people more like me, left of center, the organizations and groups. But when the Atlanta Braves wanted to open up a stadium in our county, move from Atlanta to Cobb County, the suburbs, and charge us, 60-something% of the cost, a billionaire-owned team, cost us hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayers, I was able to form a coalition that had the Tea Party, right, and the MAGA people sitting with the Nation of Islam and the Black Panthers and the same tables working together as a coalition, because this is not right? We found common ground, and guess what? Everybody found out the other people didn't have horns. And we've got friendships to this day.
And Mark, you might know the individual, or maybe Rich, you do too. That just reminded me, one of the Black Panthers, I believe, is known to have said they've got us turned against each other when really we should be together because we're all in that same boat.
I don't know the quote, but it sounds like Fred Hampton to me.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I've heard that. Yeah. And that's true. It's true. I mean, I hate to call out the 1% or 10%, but it's a reality. The beautiful thing is Americans don't want to. Reason why it's a global woke institute. You don't even have to look far. If you just want to look at white people, and you don't want to learn from black people, look at Europe. How are they able to give free education, free higher education, free health care, free, living wages, all of these social safety nets guaranteed, and they still have rich people and profitable corporations? Okay? That's the secret that the elite 10% here don't want us to know and fight against. There's so much to learn out there. Really, when I moved to the Caribbean, and met my wife, I went down at 82 with a backpack and a flute and a drum, and because I heard the flute and the drum is universal everywhere, and I came back 6 years later with a wife and 3 kids. But you have to read the book for that story. But that was I thought I was woke, even somewhat woke, until it took me like 2 years of sitting under mango trees with functionally illiterate West Indians, right, who we would consider functionally illiterate, to shed my American ugliness, the ugly American arrogance, and learn and listen from them. And my God, what an education. I came back Robin Hood. I came back and told the people I owed debts to, the banks and everything, listen, I will pay you, but I'm paying you in Eastern currency, EC dollars. I'm starting now the global world currency where it's all one. Yeah, because that simple teaching, I derive my inspiration, total transparency, from the Baha'i faith, which is, to me, the most universal, because I can learn from every religion, every culture, everything. It doesn't restrict me. And from Dr. King's teachings, which are pretty similar. And so one of the Baha'i teachings is one thing that will change the world right away is one universal currency. Right away, equity around the world. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not easy to do, but I'm just saying. But these are the things that we need to, in our authentic identity. America sending bombs to Israel and to Ukraine is not America's authentic identity. It's not even in our founding Declaration of Independence. We've strayed so far, and I'm not putting down. There is a reason we're sending conventional weapons to Israel, because they have nuclear weapons, and if we don't send conventional weapons, that might be an option. So there's always two sides of the story, and my Palestinian friends I'm explaining that to, is that there's reasons why we're not straying that far from our identity that we want to kill innocent children. But go ahead, sorry, shut me up.
Well, what you raised there is a really interesting subtlety, which is how quickly we allow ourselves to rationalize certain kinds of behaviors that on the surface of them are not in alignment with the principle of oneness. Mm-hmm. Like the idea that conventional weapons provision is a bulwark against something negates that it's actually encouraging another something.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea that there's some kind of viable or reasonable trade-off in that is kind of a fallacy, because any use of weapons
Mm-hmm.
would tend to be an unacknowledgement or a lack of awareness of our oneness, right?
Right, right.
So in this conflict that you've discussed, this now legendary, especially for people of a certain age, like I've lived with awareness of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for a long time in my life. I've been informed about it since the early 70s. The truth is, there's no good reason for us to be supplying Israel with conventional weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And the justification for that lives in a dynamic where you have to assume certain colonialist points of view and justify colonialist points of view. And then secondarily to that, this idea that somehow the United States has a responsibility to the people of Israel to supply them with weapons out of some noble idea. Mm-hmm. It's a fallacy. Right. Now, do I want to engender or encourage the Israeli people to be subject to violence from the people that don't like them? No.
Right.
But the idea that there's a degree at which having a weapon given to someone else for use is in alignment with oneness doesn't make sense.
You're right.
And if we follow that thread all the way through, where do we end up? We end up at might makes right. Right. Very human kind of concept, which is that as long as I can defeat evil as I see evil, I'm justified in my dominance and creation of violence in order to subdue it. Because in the world of, Darwinist, survivalist sort of mentality, that if I can kill off the quote inferior around me, then I will be superior. Right. And that's the measure at which nature tends to show us a story. Now, Darwin was racist, and he missed a big point. He talks about evolution, I think, like a couple of times in the book, but cooperation a lot more than we actually recognize. And the more and more as we understand biology and we understand systems engineering in the biological sphere, we see that it's community, cooperative spirits that actually engender success within species, survival. So that's a mouthful, right? I took us a long way. The point I'm trying to make is that
Mark, you're too woke, but go ahead.
It's super slippery slope for us to decide that somehow supplying one weapon versus supplying another is in alignment with some sort of value, especially when you consider that the United States itself is built on a genocide all on its own, right? And
I have a question, because both of you, there's a lofty element to wokeness and global thought. But here we are, three human beings, and it's so easy to say these elements of oneness. But how does that relate personally to my day-to-day waking up, my challenges that I personally have as a human being? And what are the elements that you both are talking about in oneness that are lived moment to moment personally?
Good point and good question, Greg. And really, it dovetails to what Mark was speaking about. When I was half joking when I said you're too woke. I mean, we have to work with what we have and with who we have. And I'm not trying to say you or me, we're better than other people because we know this stuff. That doesn't mean anything. There's people who don't know this, like Greg saying, that are acting better than I am. Okay? Just out of the goodness of their heart, or maybe because of lack of ego and so forth. So to answer your question, Greg, is, I taught my kids a 51% club, a 51% club. If you're doing good 51% of the time, you've made it. That's all we can ask. Anything above that is great, angelic. Okay. And so, one of my favorite bumper stickers was think globally, act locally. Okay. And so that's where we have to start. In your coaching, Mark, I'm sure you have to start at elemental levels depending on where people are at. And that's the same thing. So you got to get up and first be happy with yourself. If you're not happy with yourself, if you don't know yourself and you don't love yourself, then it's hard to do the 51% good to others. It's just hard because you're not doing it to yourself. Okay. That's the elemental. That's the place we have to start. And that's where we connect. That's what everybody wants, to love yourself and love others. When people call me with death threats because I'm on the news advocating for the immigrants, I get that. I don't get them as much anymore because I try to push other people in front of me, especially people of color, to the media. No, it sounds like, hey, right, it sounds like I'm avoiding the threats, but really I'm trying to give equity because the media always interviews me and not my friends of color. But seriously, when I get death threats, I try to reason with the people and say, man or lady, ma'am, you must be hurting. If you're, to this extent that you've called me to threaten to kill me, you really must be hurting. What's going on in your life? Because our organizations, we don't only help Black people or people of color, we help anybody, So, what's going on? And that's really what it is. And that's why MAGA has hit home so much, because especially people that look like me and you are going through this massive identity crisis because we're finding out that everything we've been taught, our identity is false. We're not superior. Men are not superior. White people are not superior. Christians are not superior. All of these things. I went through this in the 70s, and you know what I turned to deal with that? Drugs, like everybody else. I was high from the age of 14 to 20. That's how I dealt with it. And that's how my generation dealt with it. While we were searching for ourselves, we were high. I mean, part of that, LSD and hallucinogenics, now we can look back and say that helped. But it didn't help the people who died or the people who became addicts like me. I'm addictive by nature. Obviously, with 8 kids, I just transferred my addiction, but from drugs. So that's the exactly. God, the universe knows this guy. We got to keep him busy to get him in the 51% club to keep him there. So that's So what you were talking about, Mark. I am like the most anti-gun person. I'm a pacifist, okay? My kids tell me, like, if we see a stranger walking outside, I'll go outside and say, can I help you? My kids lock the doors. My son gets his gun, just packs it, just in case, right? Completely different orientations. Okay. Katrina, I'll refer you to the book. I think Katrina taught us a lot, and these hurricanes are teaching us a lot. We learn a lot from catastrophe, pandemic, mutual aid. Unfortunately, that's the way we learn. We have 2 choices always, I believe, to learn from good or learn from catastrophe. Read the book by Scott Crow, famous environmentalist, Black Flags, Windmills, and the Common Ground Collective, the true story of Katrina, right? He was a pacifist like me. He went to rescue some of the Black Panthers who had just gotten out of jail and were in Katrina, in New Orleans. He went to help get them there, and he and his group were shot at by people on bridges, by the militias, the white militias, by the army, by the police. He had to go back to Austin and guess what? Arm himself and his group and learn basic things on how to use weapons, right? They went back armed, and the Common Ground they never had to shoot one bullet, but just the fact they were armed, okay? And they formed the Common Ground Collective, which became the Red Cross for Katrina. Even the Red Cross funneled their money and aid to the people through the Common Ground Collective. It's a great story of how we overcome all of these things. And really, that's what I'm teaching people. The last chapters of my book is intentional community. We need to form intentional communities right now for our own survival. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm wondering with your experience of death threats and this book that you just read, and there's a lot of the shadow of humanity that it seems you're immersed in your work, and yet you seem like a very bright, joyful human being. What do you do on a day-to-day basis to retain that sense of hope and joy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm quote religious Baha'i, and we have prayers, meditation, and I can use Buddhist ones, Hindu. You know, I personally have my own routine, and music, the arts, which you're into as well. I mean, the arts are a spiritual channel. That's channeling spiritual knowledge and emotional intelligence, Mark. That's, music is mine. When I work out and do my calisthenics, I put on YouTube music videos, and I have my playlist, and I'll make sure my kids send it to you, Greg, for my memorial videos, because I decided that's what I was going to do for my 70th birthday. I put together my playlist, rented a room in the library, invited the public and my family, my whole family. And guess what? I started out by talking about how we need to, balance now, and how we're going to have our first woman president. Of course, I have 6 daughters, so who are all have machetes, so I have to praise women. And, in the old days, the Italian father had to protect his daughters from the guys. I have to take their boyfriend's side, and protect them from the girls, which is great because men and women are becoming equal. Okay. And so in the middle of my presentation, a woman friend of our family from the Nation of Islam, very strong woman, came and took over the whole presentation. I never got to do my music videos, but I said, this is what I asked for. This is my destiny. Okay. So, music and the arts is connects us everywhere quickly.
Yeah.
So I want to respond to your question, Greg, about oneness.
Okay.
The way I see it is oneness is the fundamental baseline. It is the fabric of existence and the universe. It's the thing that exists beyond our awareness of it. And the reason oneness isn't more universal in terms of our awareness and our consciousness and our actions is that we are actively being clouded against recognizing it. And the history of uncovering the story of how slavery and policing came into existence in the United States has begun to shed light for people who look like me on the ways that we've been sort of indoctrinated and brainwashed, and the veil has been placed over our eyes. But it is way older than the American experience. It's way older than the European colonization of America. This idea that the truth of oneness is being obscured intentionally by people who gain from having us not know it is as old as Christianity, if not older. And so the idea is that we are waking up to, again, oneness. And in order to do that, we have to shed the veil of what has conditioned us and clouded us to not to see it. And that process can be uncomfortable because, as we've said, you shed aspects of who you think you are. Even the idea of self dissolves when we get to the point of understanding oneness at its most powerful level. And there's another thing I'd like to add, which is that one of the things we learned is the Buddhist idea of conceit. We learned this with the Remember Institute, which is that the Buddhist idea of conceit is that there's no inferior, there's no superior, and there's no equal, which is paradoxical because when you think about it, well, what's left? There's nothing left, right? but when you sink into this idea, it frees you from struggling to try to maintain your status, either the victim status of being inferior or the perpetuation of making someone else inferior if you're superior, or the idea that there's a need to make equal occur because it's not necessary. It's just the ground on which we rest. Oneness is the ground on which we rest. But there's so much injustice that we're all witness to. So the question then becomes, what meaning can my life have if I'm willing to step into the arena of addressing injustice to the best of my ability? And I think, Rich, your book is a powerful recognition of that story. Also, your activities, as you describe them in terms of coalition building and things like that, is another. But there's many flavors of this. And the hopefulness is that once someone takes the test on your website and gets their woke score, they can realize that there's more to be had for them. There's more to be brought forth in value to life in general, to oneness in general, through our own struggles to liberate ourselves and then liberate others.
So wait, did you take the test on his website?
Well, mentally, I read through it quickly enough to sort of gain a sense of it.
That's a no. That's a no.
and I deliberately put howwokeami.org, not how woke are you, because it's not for me to judge. It's a self test. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and just reading through it became very challenging, right? This idea of challenging my beliefs and my norms. And I think that's the key. When we start to be willing to be challenged, something can be born within us. A greater result for the collective can be born within us. And, through our work in A Course in Miracles, Greg, we see the unfolding of that process, right? There's this always unfolding nature of people waking up is a great metaphor, but clearing their karma. Like there's so many ways to say this thing. So I have a question, Rich.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
To what degree was sex liberating for you? How did sex play a role in you finding further awakening?
Did my wife call you before this?
Yeah, the study in her hand.
She told me not to tell you.
No, it's funny because I was going to talk about sex, and I forget in what milieu. And I said, just in case she's listening outside the door, I better not. But anyway, the 70s was free sex, was free drugs, was free everything. No holds barred, everything goes. Okay, so I was part of that revolution. Obviously, my kids ask me now, do you have any other kids that we don't know about, and were you ever gay? And those are legitimate questions, and I said both. I don't know. I don't remember. I was high most of the time. But if I become rich or famous, we'll find out about the kids. But I don't think willingly I was homosexual, although I had nothing against it. I put my earring in the left ear, which meant straight, and right view. So anyway, so really then when I became spiritual, and by the way, how I got out of my addiction, I was addicted to heroin. I did international drug deals. My father was a New York cop. All the cops' kids were the biggest drug dealers. We couldn't get arrested. And of course I'm Italian, so the mafia. But I was addicted. I'm an addict by nature. And it was Buddhism that helped kick my habit. I had a Buddhist martial arts instructor who taught me for the first time about my spirit, soul, emotional part. He taught me the martial arts, but he taught the whole religion. Okay. So that was like my awakening, my real awakening. And then I studied all the religions, traveled halfway around the world, fueled it by selling drugs on the pot, hash oil on the side. That was the hypocrisy. But then came to the belief of oneness of religion, oneness of spiritual paths are all leading to the same, different paths up the mountain, and eventually, Baha'i. But the reason I say all of that is that sex then, I went the other extreme, fanatical, I wouldn't even give my kids drugs, Tylenol growing up, you know what I'm saying? So anti-drug, and sex became just a thing you needed to do to have kids. And God, obviously with 8 kids, if God wants us to have kids, we'll have kids. We didn't use protection, that. So really my current wife, I was married once before for 9 months, but I've been married 42 years to this wife, the true spiritual yoke, trying equal yoking. I was her first partner, and she was not my first one. Married her in the Caribbean. She was 17, I was 27, and really, we never did the romantic stuff. So sex was a practical thing for us. It's something you did. You slept together, and felt good to the release. So we didn't have a healthy sexual relationship really most of our life. So that's my I'm learning now, really learning now what, I remember what I was going to say, in authentic identity of men, right? My belief is that my authentic identity, sexual identity, is to please my partner, because I can be pleased much more easily than she can, orgasmically, or however you want to say it. So that's my role. If you don't get off, if she doesn't get off, then I haven't fulfilled. I'm not getting off. I might have an orgasm, but I'm not getting off mentally and emotionally. And so that brings that one. Sorry for that long story to get.
No, you don't have to apologize. That's why we're here, is to hear your long stories. But I'm going to reflect this back to you so I can have clarification.
Sure.
It sounds like what you're saying is that what sex taught you is that altruism is much more rewarding than self-focus.
Thank you.
Is that true?
Yes, definitely.
And did you learn that and know that before you discovered it around sex? Did you have a sense of that before it was about sex?
Oh yeah, definitely. Sex came late. Like I said, the balance wasn't there. We tend to, as humans, go one way or the other. We're all spiritual or all physical, or all emotional. That balance, that's our purpose in life, is to find the balance. Okay, male, female, all of these yin yang balances. So between the heart, the real simple one is between the heart and the mind, that people can relate to. Especially, go ahead.
Wait, let me understand that real quick, because for those who are just listening, Rich, you said the heart and pointed to what we usually call the mind, and then you said the mind and pointed to your heart. So what is that?
Thanks for analyzing it. I'll have to go back. I didn't even realize I did that. But that's good. No, that's good, because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to bring my heart to my head and my head to my heart. You know what I'm saying? Right. To get that, because my orientation, and typically white European, I'm generalizing, orientation is, if it makes sense to the head, we'll let it filter down to the heart and feel good about it. Whereas other cultures, traditional indigenous cultures, first they have to trust you and feel good about you or the messenger or whatever, how it's being delivered. Then it'll filter to the head.
And let me ask this, since we're on the topic of sex, sort of. There's also the realm of the gut and the lower regions and the energy that is there in the groin in these lower regions. And there's even scientifically now that there's a second brain that's in the abdomen area, the gut, and the relationship of information between the two. So, have you explored in this new wokeness the intelligence of your groin and your sexuality?
We're just starting it, because as I, kind of alluded to, my wife and I are just restarting our relationship.
That's
because
beautiful.
our relationship was all built on just traditional stuff, having kids. She had no identity except mother and wife. Even she's just getting that now. So we're just starting that. I have a friend, Dr. Ra, a Rastafarian, an herbalist, and he teaches men ejaculation classes. Okay, ejaculation.
Yeah.
So that's a big part. It's I'm glad you guys brought it up. I hope she's not listening, because we'll be arguing. Why did you share all this stuff?
Well, I don't think you've shared anything that's to a violation of her so far.
No.
And I would check you if I thought you were going to do that.
Well,
okay, thanks.
But I would say, I think our openness of talking about sexuality is part of the healing of the pain that's in our society.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to just ask, you talked about going from self-centeredness to altruism, but my theory is that when you first landed in recovery was when that first woke up in you. Does that sound right? That as you move through addiction into a place of recovery, you begin to see your life as having more extrinsic value in your service to others than in service to your own pleasure centers. Is that true, or am I making that up?
No, I mean, it's partially true, but remember, the 70s was a mixture of both. The milieu I grew up in, I was, I didn't develop my own personal identity till that period. When I found Buddhism, became clean, whatever. But I was given a collective identity, which was, I would say, 51% good. In that time period, because it was pushing us towards altruism. It was easier then than the young people have it now. We had a greater camaraderie, partly because, we had the draft. We were fighting the war, peace, but we had the draft, which affected each one of us individually. Today, we don't have that. You know what I'm saying? It's not personally that. So we had all these connections. I was a hippie, which I later learned was a function of white privilege. You didn't have too many black hippies. The black people who were in the struggle were in it for their lives, for their rights as basic human beings. I was in it for some other people, for Vietnamese people and our soldiers who shouldn't get killed. It was far away from me, and so, but we all were together. We were thrown together in this great movement, Cesar Chavez, all of that. So we had a collective identity towards altruism. The reason why that was not sustained, when they killed off our leaders, Hampton, Dr. King, Kennedy, and because we were dependent on leaders, and because we were dependent on collective identity without individual identity. And so that's when, some of us went to religion, but when others went to materialism from the hippie movement. And by the way, the mafia started, they were always one step ahead. They dealt drugs, then they bought rehab drug centers and ran them, and they formed the religious communes, the Children of God and cults and things like that, made money off of that because they saw what was coming next, what the next thing was. And so that was, so that's when I started my individual you know.
So it sounds like you have some insight on the New York mob landscape. And I have this understanding that there was a period of time where the Italians, by the way, my ancestry is Sicilian and Prussian. So that's where I've traced my indigenous roots to, Sicilian, Prussia. So there was a point at which the Italians lost the ground of the New York metropolitan area to the Russian mafia. Did you witness that? And do you think that that's true?
I mean, organized crime. I didn't witness that because I was out. I was out of it then. But the fact is, organized crime did split. I mean, there's the Russian mafia, the black mafia. Then in Harlem, you know, it diversified in a good way, I guess you might say. Again, you know, you got the 51% club. But Mark and Greg. America, because of our lack of identity or our struggle with identity, because America is the most diverse place on earth outside of the Caribbean. Caribbean intermarried for 200 years. Okay, so I have to give my kudos to my wife for that. Okay, and my kids who have all those genes. But we're based on cults. MAGA is a cult. Okay, Nation of Islam is a cult. Christianity, most churches are a cult. Baha'i is a cult. Cult is not a bad word, like propaganda. It could be good cult.
It's short for culture.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so the organized crime, the mafia, we all need a cult. Intentional community is what I'm promoting. It's another word for cult. It's a positive word. Okay, so, you know, that's part of our search for oneness. Is really the world, like you said. This predates. We started out at the cave, you know, then we went to the tribe, then the tribe grew into, nation states eventually, then nations arose, and now we're global, one world. So we've progressed. That's the Baha'i teaching. Look, nothing. It was through violence and through upheaval and so forth, but so is birth, any birth. And look, we've birthed the whole world. We've made it. You know, we've made it. The next step in the Baha'i teaching is interplanetary unity. You know, okay, so we've made it. And at any stage, we could have destroyed ourselves, but in smaller increments. You know, and now we can destroy ourselves globally if we don't. So we're making it. You know, but we need to have it's a lot better when you have that consciousness rather than you're fighting or being dragged along. That's the point I make to my conservative friends. America's liberal. I mean, it's 70-something% liberal now. You know, why fight the tide? It's not going back. Okay, but there's good conservative principles that we need. The liberals need. You know, so let's work together.
So going through the alchemical process of transmuting our consciousness from the state of non-wokeness into wokeness has a benefit. Why would someone want to wake up?
Well, it's all relative, right? Again, everybody's journey, it's all their journey. So you have to ask that person, why do you want to be better? What is going to make you feel better tomorrow about yourself? Okay? I make a commitment to help you, everybody, anybody. I make this commitment on Nextdoor anyway, to take that journey as long as you're willing to drop your false supremacy and even not throw it all the way out the window, but at least suspend it for now. That race is not better, your religion is not better. That's not what makes you know.
This is a question for both of you, but first, Rich, I heard a spiritual teacher once say that once you take the step of, let's say, wokeness, of waking up, there will be challenges that you're going to regret you took that step. but not taking the step is even more painful. Do you both agree with that statement?
Definitely, because my philosophy is if the door's open, at least you can put a feather through it or put a toe through it to check it out, test it out, because that if that door closes, you will probably regret it. It might not open again. That's basically my philosophy. But you might want someone to hold your hand through that door.
I think the world, karma, our lives are biologically and spiritually designed to bring us into a state of trial. And the avoidance of suffering is another form of suffering. And
Exactly.
what your question sort of shines a light on, Greg, is this idea that being volitional, being at will, choosing to enter into the field of our trials with a willingness to be dissolved and reborn in each breath and each awareness gives us access to something. And then when we do that collectively, it gives us access to something. So in our consumerism and our emotional rigidity, avoidance brings us farther from where we might experience, the true nature of humanity, loving kindness, compassion, artistic expression, and, a balanced ecosystem.
You know what you just touched upon is, in my experience, the spiritual realm of experience is stronger for me when I've experienced going through challenge with one other or others. There's an exponential component to the experience.
Yep, definitely.
My father says the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are bringing to us a greater opportunity to create community out of the rubble. So whenever we are faced with collective catastrophes, what's born in that moment is the truer soul nature of us, this idea of generosity and sharing and community and keeping each other company as we go through the fire of evolution of our souls.
So bringing it back to the personal, you're both in partnerships with women that have been long lasting. Have you found that to be true in your relationship, that it is strengthened by fire?
I'm going to let Rich answer. He's our guest.
Not there yet, because the fire, we avoided the fire, and we're now entering the fire. It never ends. But the beautiful thing is, we have, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Period. In anything. What we have is the beauty that we have, and probably we might not be together if we didn't have this. We have our own intentional community with our family. We could be real insular. We have 20 people in immediate family, right? So, they are our strength, just like you said, but helping us through the fire.
Awesome.
Now it's their turn. My kids are the best counselors. They don't take sides. They kick both of our butts. They're perfect for us.
It sounds like you needed a big family of children because you're strong individuals.
Yeah, I tried to warn my wife not to marry me. Let's just put it that way. I said, you don't know what you're getting into, really. She was young, 17 in the islands, although 17 in other countries is like 27 or 37 here in terms of maturity. But yeah, it's been a wild ride, and her strength, and really the reason why I went to another culture seeking a wife after my first marriage lasted 9 months in the U.S. Was because I knew that longevity, that stick-to-itiveness would be there in other cultures, to deal with that fire. So
I love that idea of stick-to-itiveness, because my own experience with a 20-year marriage that didn't last or didn't continue was there was a desire not to stick to it by one party. And the thing that I think separates my current relationship from that is that even when I'm not my best, there's a stick-to-itiveness that my partner brings to it. And as a result, we come through the darkness and reemerge in the clearing over and over and over again. And what's happened is that we've begun to trust that there's always a clearing that comes.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
And fortunately, that we continue to show up every day to choose this path together. But there's a hard lesson for me with the divorce that happened in my life, which is that there may come a day where that's not the choice. And it's hard to live with that not knowing, right? I want to grasp. I want to be attached. I want to, cement, hold, on all of those things. But the best way to do that, I found, is actually through giving as opposed to grasping. And giving without expectation, giving without like a quid pro quo, like giving to get, giving to hold that person. But when I'm generous with myself and generous with her, I don't worry as much about whether it's going to come apart or not, because I'm so busy being in the moment of abundance and generosity that I just inhabit this place of joy. And then there's other dark nights of the soul that come up. And so that's when my practice is, like you were talking about, Rich, my meditation and all the different things I do bring me through that phase of the energetic experience. And I'm so grateful for my mother who taught me what it means to love, right? And for my current partner who will not allow me to attach any of my unhelpful aspects of myself, the traumatic parts that want to try to like latch on or create codependency or things like that. She just knows better and doesn't. And I'm super grateful, although in the moment it feels very disruptive to my nervous system, but I'm grateful.
That's the word I was looking for, gratitude, which I saw on your website as well. And that's really what it reinforces itself. I told my wife every time we had big blow-ups that, listen, I'm going to get this marriage right, whether it's with you or someone else. I mean, this is a challenge that I'm going to try, and that was it.
That's interesting, because I think in our Western culture, there's so much emphasis on the romanticism of wedding and marriage. But you earlier in our conversation said equally yoked, and that yoking aspect is challenging.
Yeah. Because the yin yang. I mean, because again, it comes from, I have to put my ego back and try to experience through your eyes, how you're feeling. That's why any close partnership marriage is the most challenging thing, really. I mean, because it's so intense. You have to, it's really your workshop, it's the only thing that you can't succeed at alone.
Right. And it's also interesting, like Dr. Martin Luther King is known to have had challenges in his marriage, and a lot of them he created. And it's a place where this worldly stuff that I think us men, speaking generally, like to do, get all heady about woke and these theories up in the head, And it's where the rubber hits the road in the marriage. Like, are you really about peace and oneness? Because this moment's on fire. So what are you going to do?
Did my wife call you?
I'm shockingly no, right now.
I think this is a setup.
It's a new TV show Mark and I just started. We're going to open a door. Rich, here's
Yeah, right. Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, right. That would be real good. Especially after I've said, I hope she doesn't hear this. That would be perfect. The new Jerry Springer.
Well, as we begin to wind down this conversation, Rich, I want to ask you, what is your hope and your outcome for what you've put together in the Global Woke Institute and the way that you're moving in the world? What is it that is the vision that leads your mission?
Well, I mean, obviously I get more than I give by sharing what I've learned, by quote helping others on their path, or whether it's just their path to get fed and housed tomorrow, because that's people can't really think about woke if you don't have the basic necessities, right? So really I'm just in the stage of sharing what I've learned, and and not really expecting anything in return. My favorite book growing up was Steal This Book. I wanted to name mine Steal This Book too, but the publishers didn't like that, So, but I give it away at book. I say, I'm not white. Okay, what am I? If you get the answer right, you get a free autographed copy. At book shows and things, I give them away. So but really, what I want people to do is two things. I want them to experience their authentic identity, or the be on the path for it consciously, intentionally, because that's the joy of life. And number two, form intentional communities. I say this, that's as important in my belief as finding the food to eat tomorrow, because we don't know. Look at what just happened in Asheville, which is an artistic community in North Carolina, physically decimated, no communications, no water, California wildfires, all of these things. Of course, in my Baha'i belief, I believe that's part of that's the crucible. That's part of the karma. That's part of our learning experience. We either learn by an acts of consultative will because we want to, of altruistic, or through catastrophe. So I believe Americans, sadly, are going to learn through the latter. That's the only way, because we've been brainwashed against oneness the most, and we have the most potential for oneness. We're kind of like the head of the snake. As America goes, so goes the world, whether we like it or not. Everybody looks to us, as the example. And so the hottest fire, the purest gold's got to go through the hottest fire, to get there. And so intentional community, I want people to survive, obviously, especially people who are on the path, who have the heart and mind, maybe to get to 51%. We're going to need you to build this new world, that's coming. So that's my hope.
Well, as part of our joy in discovery in this space of the Moped Outlaws ride, we have a question that we ask all of our guests. And so we love this question. We take it seriously, but it's also interesting to see each individual's take on it. So are you ready, Rich?
I guess so.
Eminem or Foo Fighters?
Eminem.
Could you say a little bit about why?
Because, well, I don't really know Foo Fighters that well, to be honest, number one. And then Eminem is an anomaly, okay? I mean, my kids call me the wannabe, right? That's my nickname. That's my stand-up comedy routine, the wannabe. And so Eminem, broke barriers. I don't really even like his music that much, but I like his person. I like Foo Fighters music more. I don't know much about Foo Fighters. And I try to, I try to go by the music and the art, but I want to know, just like you guys, I want to know about you, before I meet you. I want to know as much as I can, or after I meet you, So that's my
All
answer.
right.
I'm sticking
Thanks
to it.
so much for joining us today. We will definitely send people to your website. If you're listening, by all means, go get the woke test. Go through your discomfort. Stand in the fire of your own growth. With love, admiration, and blessings to all. What a great time.
Likewise. Thank you, guys.
Recording stopped.